Modern day flagship phones are capable of doing way more than basic phone calls and messaging. While most flagship devices get the job done, it's always been the case that Android is light years ahead of Apple in terms of tech, but always behind Apple in terms of price, which is probably why most people pick Android over iPhone in the first place. But times have changed, and now for the first time we have a fair head-to-head comparison between a flagship Android phone and an iPhone. This is the Google Pixel XL versus the iPhone 7 Plus. Now, I mentioned price, so let's get that out of the way. In Canada, both of these starting at 32 gigs will set you back around $1,049.99 before taxes. While the iPhone goes up to 256 gigs, the Pixel tops out at 128, and of course, these guys know that 32 is just enough, but 64 would be comfortable, and they're not going to offer that to anyone. Anyways, let's get started with the boxes. No surprises from Apple, same old, same old. Meanwhile, the Pixel XL comes in this much larger box with good reason. Inside of the boxes, you'll find the usual stuff from Apple, including the charging cable and plug, plus the average sounding Lightning headphones and a dongle for Lightning the 3.5mm headphone jack. The Pixel XL box is a bit over the top, but again, with good reason. Slide back the box's box and you'll find a bunch of cables, including USB Type-C to Type-C, Type-C rapid wall charger, Type-C to USB 3, and lastly a Type-C to female USB adapter to make switching devices super easy. Notice, no headphones. Now on to the fun stuff. Just look at the matte black iPhone 7 Plus. Arguably, its color is one of its better features. You can't tell when the screen ends and the bezel begins. When it's turned off, it looks like a uniform piece of glass, and from a design perspective, you'd be hard-pressed to find any other device that looks this nice. It exudes a premium feel in the hand, or maybe that's just what they've defined premium as over the last couple of years. I know, it's boring and the same as the last 2 years' iPhones, but apparently Apple is saving a big redesign for next year, so that's something. On the other hand, I'm not sure what's going on with the Pixel. It almost looks like they got a hold of Apple's old schematics for the iPhone 6 and tried their hardest to make it look different by doing small things like moving the fingerprint scanner to the back, but still keeping the big bezel on the bottom. And speaking of the back, I don't know what the hell is going on with that glass top half, but to me it looks incredibly dumb. I guess on the plus side, there's no camera bump, so the phone sits flat, but it's kind of a weird wedge shape. So both have great build quality, but the iPhone feels more premium when you juxtapose the two. As boring as its design may be, it's still better than the glass on the back of the Pixel, which absolutely ruins it for me. But hey, you might like it. Moving on. The bottoms of both devices are pretty similar in that both have reversible charging ports with symmetrical speaker grills on either side, but in both cases you'll find that only one of those grills actually works as a speaker. The other is purely for symmetry, or maybe it houses the microphone. The top of the Pixel has a 3.5mm headphone jack while the iPhone is bare. Inversely, the left side of the iPhone holds the volume rocker and the vibration toggle while the Pixel is bare. The right side holds the volume rocker for the Pixel, and both phones have their screen on and off buttons on the right side too. While this placement makes sense, it's executed better on the iPhone in my opinion, because this is where your thumb naturally falls. While on the Pixel, the power button is located above the volume rocker, so you naturally press the volume down button instead of the power button. So there's a bit of a learning curve. Thankfully, you can also unlock the screen by pressing on the fingerprint scanner for both phones, and on that note, I can say that the iPhone is way more accurate, working more often than not when compared to the Pixels. This is also probably why it takes so many more presses when setting up a fingerprint on the iPhone versus on the Pixel, where you just kind of press your finger 4 or 5 times and you're good to go. As far as the feel in the hand is concerned, I have pretty big hands, and I find that the Pixel is easier to hold, and that's largely because of the square sides and slightly lighter and slightly narrow characteristics of the Pixel versus the iPhone 7 Plus. So be that as it may, I still think that the Pixel has this unnecessary chin on the bottom, and that makes it a little bit harder to hold, but on the other hand, the iPhone 7 Plus is just massive. Throw a case on the iPhone 7 Plus and it becomes almost unusable with one hand. One of the main things affected typically by the way you hold the phone is the sound quality coming out of the built-in speakers, but as I mentioned, they both have speaker grills on the bottom, but only one of those is usable. So while the Pixel has a downward-facing speaker which plays mono sound, the iPhone gets 2 speakers, one on the bottom and one in the earpiece, which now doubles as a loudspeaker. But I should mention, it's not fair to consider it 2 speakers. In my opinion, it sounds more like 1.5 speakers with the bulk of the power coming out of the bottom-facing speaker. But still, it's better than just the one speaker alone. And I know it's dumb, I can't believe I have to say this, but the Pixel can be charged while you listen to music through headphones because it has a headphone jack. And the iPhone can't. You need a special adapter or a dongle or something along those lines where you can plug in your headphones and a charger at the same time. because they both go through the Lightning port. Now let's move over to the screens for a quick second. They're both 5.5-inch displays, while the iPhone's 1080p LCD screen looks just as sharp as the Pixel XL's Quad HD resolution AMOLED display. Trust me, you're going to want the resolution and optimized screen real estate of the Pixel over the low-res iPhone display. What the iPhone lacks in screen resolution, it makes up for in cool tricks, including Force Touch, where you can press down on the screen for almost a right-click type effect. And since this technology showed up almost a year or 2 years ago in the iPhone, it is supported by most third-party apps as well. Meanwhile, the new Android OS on the Pixel introduced a very similar long press option, but it's kind of tricky to use since almost no other apps besides the native ones support this feature at this point. And it's also kind of tricky to hold your finger down on the icon just long enough to toggle this feature, but not too long because then it'll trigger the move icon function. Despite this new feature, the Pixel is every bit as customizable with launchers, icon packs, widgets, root access, all that it's always been. And this is kind of the same story on the iPhone, and by that I mean it's just as boring, rigid, and uncustomizable as ever. Seriously, Apple, this home screen has looked the same for the last 5 or 6 years, and all I want is to move an icon out of this flippin' grid. As far as the performance goes, I'll keep it simple. These are flagship phones. They both perform extremely well. Forget the number of gigs, forget the CPU's performance on benchmarking. They work fantastic, and you'll be hard-pressed to find anything to slow them down. Of course, there will be occasional hiccups, but that's with any phone. And one of the main things that Google's making a big deal about with this version of the OS is the personal assistant. It's incredibly smart, but it still feels kind of half-baked. So I guess the cool thing is that it remembers now, so if I ask it a follow-up question after an initial question without specifying, it'll still be able to keep that context of the last question in mind as it looks for a new answer. So here I asked for when the next game is and then how much the tickets are. While Siri just looked up ticket prices in general, OK Google found prices for the event I was just asking it about. Here's one of the cool things you probably know about the iPhone. It's waterproof and dustproof, which means that if you're out in the rain or if you happen to drop it in the toilet or something like that, it'll be perfectly fine. But bear in mind that Apple will not give you anything on the warranty if you get water damage on the phone. Yes, you heard correctly. Meanwhile, the Pixel doesn't offer any sort of waterproofing, at least they won't say it officially because of liability. So I'd be a little bit wary of getting it wet, even in the slightest bit of rain. And last but not least, the camera. The take home really is they're both fantastic cameras. As far as video goes, the iPhone 7 Plus has OIS, while the Pixel has electronic image stabilization, EIS. And in my opinion, the EIS is not very good. It looks nice if you're stable, but if you're moving around too much, then the footage is almost unusable. And as far as still performance goes, I'd say that there's a lot more noise on the Pixel than there is on the iPhone 7 Plus. But as I said, check out those videos for a clearer idea of what I'm talking about. Anyways, that's been it, guys. It's never been harder to choose between an Android and an iPhone because they're both pretty much on the same playing field, which, by the way, is an extremely overpriced playing field in my opinion. But anyways, that's been the review. Make sure you guys leave this video a thumbs up and comment below on which one you would choose of these two. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.